Is Mark Zuckerberg protecting free speech, or is he bending the knee? That is what a lot of people are asking and debating right now, since Zuck, the CEO of Meta, announced some absolutely massive changes to the way that the company will be handling content moderation on its platforms. Right, and chief among them is Zuck announcing that the company is ending its third-party fact-checking program in favor of a community notes system similar to X. And the system set to be rolled out in the US only at first over the next couple of months.
After Trump first got elected in 2016, the legacy media wrote non-stop about how misinformation was a threat to democracy. We tried in good faith to address those concerns without becoming the arbiters of truth. But the fact-checkers have just been too politically biased and have destroyed more trust than they've created, especially in the US.
And with that, it's true, Meta launched its initial fact-checking system way back in 2016, shortly after Donald Trump was elected. And it worked by running information on its platforms through third-party fact-checkers certified by the International Fact-Checking Network and the European Fact-Checking Standards Network. And this program eventually involved more than 90 organizations that would fact-check posts in more than 60 languages. So in the US, for example, that included groups that you may have heard of, such as PolitiFact and FactCheck.org. And according to Meta's website, the first step in the process would be identifying potential misinformation, which would be done automatically by way of community input or through the efforts of fact-checkers. Then the next step would be reviewing the content with fact-checkers labeling content false, altered, partly false, missing context, satire, or true. And from there, Meta said that it would work to ensure that people are clearly informed about misinformation, that fewer people see misinformation in the first place, and that repeat offenders are dealt with in some way. Right? And those fact-checking measures applied to any posts on Facebook, and then they expanded to include Instagram in 2019 and Threads last year. Now, notably, with all that, according to places like the New York Times, multiple studies have shown that interventions like Facebook's fact-checks were effective at reducing belief in falsehoods and reducing how often such content was shared. On the other hand, some say the community notes approach is less effective, at least on X, where they require consensus from users with varying perspectives before a fact check is published. Right? And according to the Poynter Institute, for example, less than 10% of community notes drafted by X users actually end up getting published on the platform. And with that, we now have several digital rights groups already condemning Meta's decision. The executive director of Accountable Tech, for example, describing the decision as a gift to Donald Trump and extremists around the world. But then also someone from the advocacy group Free Press saying Zuckerberg is saying yes to more lies, yes to more harassment, yes to more hate. And also a big thing is that Meta's own fact-checking partners are reportedly pushing back on Zuckerberg's characterization of their work as biased or censorship, saying that they had no role in deciding what the company did with the content that was fact-checked. And also with all of this, of course, you have many saying fact-checking has become more politicized, with Axios being one outlet to share research saying this has contributed to a decline in the number of fact-checking sites globally. Like in North America, for instance, the number of active fact-checking sites reportedly decreased from 94 to 90 from 2020 to 2023. And also with this isn't the most shocking, right? We've already seen Zuckerberg and Meta kind of backtracking on this issue before. Right, last August, for example, Zuckerberg claimed that the Biden White House pressured Meta to censor COVID-19 content during the pandemic. And now, with this latest announcement, you have Zuckerberg really seem to be weighing in on this larger conversation rather than a specific case.
There's been widespread debate about potential harms from online content. Governments and legacy media have pushed to censor more and more. A lot of this is clearly political. But there's also a lot of legitimately bad stuff out there. Drugs, terrorism, child exploitation. These are things that we take very seriously, and I want to make sure that we handle responsibly. So we built a lot of complex systems to moderate content. But the problem with complex systems is they make mistakes. Even if they accidentally censor just 1% of posts, that's millions of people. And we've reached a point where it's just too many mistakes and too much censorship.
And with that, the end of this kind of fact-checking, it's just one of the changes meant to deal with what's been referred to as the censorship problem, right? And so for instance, with that, Meta will reportedly stop limiting political content, with Zuckerberg also saying that Meta will be removing restrictions on topics like immigration and gender that are, in his words, out of touch with mainstream discourse. And then, in addition to all that, you have him revealing that Meta's trust and safety and content moderation teams would be moved from California to Texas, with him saying there that that would, quote, help remove the concern that biased employees are overly censoring content. And then, in addition to all that, Meta will reportedly be refocusing its automated filters on scanning for what he called illegal and high-severity policy violations such as terrorism, child sexual exploitation, drugs, fraud, and scams, relying on users to report low-severity violations before it takes action. And with all this, you had Zuck notably acknowledging the potential downside.
The reality is that this is a trade-off. It means we're going to catch less bad stuff, but we'll also reduce the number of innocent people's posts and accounts that we accidentally take down.
With all this, one of the things that's been very interesting to look at is the kind of variation in the media's coverage of this story, right? When you look out, you see CNN, for example, emphasizing in a headline the fact that Zuck has acknowledged that more harmful content will appear on Meta platforms now. But then on the other side of this, you have Fox News painting a more positive picture, highlighting the idea that this is about free expression. Then another Fox News article documenting how many conservatives are celebrating this as a huge win for free speech. Also, another big thing is that many outlets, including the likes of the New York Times and the Washington Post, for example, they are emphasizing the timing of this decision, which comes less than 2 weeks before Trump's taking office. And a big thing there is that even Zuck himself seemed to suggest that the outcome of the election played a role.
The recent elections also feel like a cultural tipping point towards once again prioritizing speech. So we're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms.
And with all that, you had Zuckerberg saying that Meta would work with the incoming Trump administration to promote free speech around the world.
We're going to work with President Trump to push back on governments around the world that are going after American companies and pushing to censor more. The only way that we can push back on this global trend is with the support of the US government. And that's why it's been so difficult over the past 4 years when even the US government has pushed for censorship. By going after us and other American companies, it has emboldened other governments to go even further.
With Zuckerberg here citing Europe, for example, as one place with, quote,
an ever-increasing number of laws institutionalizing censorship and making it difficult to build anything innovative there.
With that, looking at how people are talking about this, interestingly, you have the Wall Street Journal saying that Meta's decision to remove restrictions on certain types of speech, it echoes the approach taken by Musk after he bought X. Which on that note, Musk actually reshared a post celebrating Meta's decision to implement X-style community notes. Also, regarding the timing of the Meta announcement, you had multiple outlets, like NBC News in this case, describing the changes as part of a broader effort among CEOs and business leaders currying favor with the incoming Trump administration. And to that point, Meta, along with several other tech companies, they've all donated $1 million to Trump's inaugural fund. Also with Zuckerberg, he dined with Trump at Mar-a-Lago back in November. And then internally within the company, they recently appointed Republican Joel Kaplan to lead its policy team, as well as announcing that UFC's Dana White, a longtime supporter and friend of Donald Trump, would join its board. And so of course, with all this, depending on where you're going on the internet, very different reactions. You go one place, you see a lot of people raising concerns about the possibility that Meta's doing this to appease Trump and saying that the changes here are going to make misinformation worse. But then you go to a different corner of the internet and you see people praising the decision and seeing it as a huge win for free speech. And so with all that, I gotta pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts around this news with Zuckerberg and Meta's changes? But then let's go from something that's gonna affect so many people to something more specific, right? Because I want to talk about John Harrell and a question, which is how many push-ups do you think you could do in one sitting? Hey, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this clip from the full Philip DeFranco show. And also a big thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring our Clips channel. Turn your passion into profit over at squarespace.com/Phil or use the QR code. Because whether you're launching a business or a lucrative side hustle, your website is your digital business card. It's the only space where you control the story, no algorithms or distractions. And with Squarespace, it's so easy because they got a ton of stunning professional templates with drag and drop editing that makes site design incredibly simple, no coding required. So get started for free at squarespace.com/Phil or scan the QR code on screen and use code Phil for 10% off when ready to launch. Squarespace.com/Phil.